People aren't rejecting Christianity because they don't think it makes sense. They're rejecting Christianity because they don't think it's good. Hello, and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co-host, Nathan Rittenhouse.
And I'm your co-host, Cameron McAllister.
I want to mention somebody who disagrees with me on something and then get Cameron's partial disagreement with the partial disagreement to me. So
I'm lost.
For those of you, they'll just make that complicated. For those of you who remember the previous podcast that we did, and I love having the ability to go back and fix and correct or comment on previous things that were said, we talked about the conversion of Ayan Hirsi Ali to Christianity. And in that episode, I had said, yeah, but it sort of seems like there's a bit of a instrumental usage of the way in which she's doing this. Because she says fundamentally, Christianity best preserves Western values of which she is dedicated to. And I might have it here. No, I don't. But so Ross Douthat actually commented on this in a New York Times article in response to her conversion of saying there have been some Christians who have been critical of that because it seems to be an instrumental view of conversion. And I had said the same thing. I wasn't challenging her actual beliefs. I was just saying it seems like she wrote this as if this is pragmatically the best option without alluding to whether or not she thinks it's actually true. Now, she gave two reasons. One, that she thinks, Christianity is the best stabilization for liberal Western values, which I'm not arguing there. And that secondly, she couldn't live within the meaningless void that she felt that atheism left her with. So I agree to that. And I'm assuming that there is more to the conversion than just that. Just that's the way that she presented it. But Sohrab Ahmari kind of came out swinging against people who even asked those questions, who said, look, you don't really have a right to ask those questions of her. That's between her and her pastor and her personal belief. Christianity has always propagated civilizationally. And so it's right that we would celebrate somebody who sees the civilizational benefit to the Christian faith. And even if that's the reason she embraces it, that's enough. Now, that's a truncated, real summary of what he said. But so there's probably a bit of truth to that. But Cameron, can you A, remind people who Sohrab Ahmari is, and B, what you see in that? I mean, so it's enough of a thing that if you have Ross Douthat commenting on it, Sohrab Ahmari commenting on it, it's out there, it's in the water. How should we be thinking about this?
Yeah, you have two prominent public intellectuals commenting on it. Sohrab Ahmari is a journalist with an increasing hand in politics as well. He's a very gifted writer. He writes frequently for First Things magazine, and he shows up in a number of different, I would say, conservative publications that, are esteemed. He's also what would be called an integralist, and you can go down a rabbit trail with that. But essentially, right, yeah. So I suppose another way of putting it would be he's a Constantinian. He is a conservative Catholic who believes that the church should have a heavier hand, politically speaking, in the preservation of civilization. Do you think I phrased that
I think that's right.
enough?
So let's just, an integrationalist. So that, just to catch everybody up to speed here, is a specific brand that still exists within some branches of Catholicism that would have been a much more traditional Catholic view throughout the past. Probably the farther back you go, the more likely that was to be the majority view, which essentially doesn't see a separation between church and state, in the sense that if the church ran the state would be better, would be kind of the view there. So from somebody coming from that perspective, I can see his point of saying this is a win, however you want to look at it. Lots of governors and politicians, even if you look at a lot of the early mission work, missionaries went in and converted the king or the prince or the governor or the ruler or whatever, and then Christianity disseminated through the culture that way. So, hey, let's celebrate if, a high profile intellectual, whatever the motivation is, recognizes the goodness of Christianity for its practical outworkings in society.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are some aspects of what he said and that I do appreciate, but I would push back against others. So I suppose the gentle way of putting it is I believe Sohrab Ahmari's political vision is problematic. and that's an understatement. So I'm not with him on that. But with regard to the scrutiny that, you know, Ali drew with her article in Unheard, it's understandable on the one hand. I mean, she's a major public intellectual, and you know, she's made a splash with books like Infidel and so on and so forth. But I also, yeah, I think part of me just thinks, well, great. I mean, whatever drew her to Christianity, this is a powerful starting point. And of course, that's not all she said. It wasn't a purely functionalist
Mhm.
argument. She doesn't just say Christianity will help us rescue Western civilization, which I deeply value because I've seen the opposite of those values in play in my own life and in my own past. She has a very dramatic past, and Nathan reminded us of some of those details in the last podcast. But also, I would say if you want to push that a little further, okay, well, fine. If you're making some kind of a statement along the lines of, well, Christianity, when it's practiced well, contributes to human flourishing, I would say that counts as evidence for Christianity. Clearly, she sees it that way as well. So that might lend a little bit more legitimacy to that statement for some people. It's not purely functionalist. This is also counting as evidence for her. But of course, that's
Okay.
not all she said, by the way. She did say, yeah, the existential vacuum left by atheism was untenable for her.
All right, I'm gonna throw you a curveball here. How is her
Oh, no.
conversion different than so, okay, how long ago was it that everybody was going nuts about Kanye and his conversion and his faith and his what's the
Oh, I
difference
think
between
you're very that's fair to bring that up, yes.
okay, pull that
What's
apart
the
for us.
difference? Well, I think so there are 2 things going on here. You have, on the one hand, an impulse in a lot of American conservative, theologically conservative Christians to latch on to celebrity Christians, and I think we're justifiably wary of that.
Mhm.
And you did see, so I think the Kanye West example is an apt one. I think of other, you know, you can name a bunch of other kind of rock star figures, Bono from U2 or Justin Bieber. You know, we can keep going. So let's spell out some of those differences. I think this is a very fair and good curveball. With with Hersey Ali's conversion story, first of all, she is a person who's in the limelight as an intellectual and
Mhm.
as a very thoughtful person. She's a person who thinks carefully through issues. That's how she's known. I'm not necessarily saying that these other people I've named aren't thinkers. Clearly they are, but they haven't distinguished themselves in their careers as thinkers first and foremost. They've distinguished themselves in their careers as artists, thoughtful artists, but there's a difference. I think we can
Mhm.
all, most of us can see that. So the manner in which this was announced from Hirsi Ali in the form of a thoughtful article on Unheard also gives you a lot more to work with. So in short, I think you have a little bit more reflection, you have a little bit more substance coming here. But I also, so on the one hand, I think we're right. I feel some tension here because I was not as gung ho and enthusiastic with the Kanye West, you know, group hug that was happening.
Brouhaha.
But on the other hand, but I still feel a little measure of conviction about that because I think our first impulse, yeah, we can be wary of the whole draw of celebrities. So I think what we want to resist there is the notion that a celebrity lends more credibility to Christianity.
Okay,
We
but
want to, you know,
so
in other words, it wouldn't be a very noble motive to embrace and say, well, see, somebody this gifted or somebody this smart is a Christian, you know, therefore. So I think we want to resist the notion that, you know, we get street cred because Kanye West is,
y
you know, says he's a Christian. But
so
yeah,
you wanna resist
we'll
the
linger
appeal
there
to
for a
a
second. What do you?
yeah, you wanna resist the appeal to authority, particularly if it's not authority, but it's popularity. So, there's one there where we would never say,
Yes, correct.
that popularity is not a reason for the gospel to be true. Um, so it can be good
Mhm.
it can be true and popular, but just because it's popular doesn't mean it's true. That's obvious about any idea. The Hersey Ali one,
Right.
there's a little difference here because she's not making a popular statement. This is not going to do her any favors. I mean, among most of her intellectual cohort that she's developed over the last several decades. But what so we wouldn't say Christianity like, oh, it's good because it's popular, but she's saying it's worth looking at because it's good. So let's make a distinction between
Yes.
something being interesting because it's popular and something being interesting because it's good. I think my default setting is I want to pursue something because it's true and have the goodness be a benefit that's attached to the back end of truth. But what about the people who pursue
Hmm.
something because it's good and then figure out that it's true? Is there a um okay, first of all, so I can see that being like a nice segue in um goodness as a gateway
Hmm.
drug into Christianity, if you would. But is it just that, or is there
Mm.
something bigger going on there?
Well, first of all, I don't know. I don't know that I would separate goodness from the truth of Christianity.
Well, so,
I don't think I could
so
make that
okay,
separation. So
so
spell
let
that out a
me
little bit for
yeah,
me.
let me spell that out. So I'm using good in the sense that it's 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 practical for Western civilization to
A social
continue.
benefit.
It's the social no the cultural benefit of preserving liberal democratic ideals.
All right. So yeah, so there are some good salutary byproducts on a societal level of Christianity practiced well. Because
Mhm.
we can also, I mean, we do have to point out, Hirsi Ali is in a unique position to appreciate the value of the Western civilizational heritage because she experienced the opposite of it. We can also, of course, turn to the history books and see, the church tied up in all sorts of knots with coercive power, where politics goes wrong, and all. So it's you can point to examples where Christianity is abused and misused.
But they're in the
Yeah, and those are
categories
abundant
where
as
it's
well.
but those abuses happen in the categories where Christianity has seen itself as the best way to run a culture, which you don't
Right,
get
which is
deep
why
hints of in
back
the
to Sohrab
teachings of
Ahmari,
Jesus.
which is why
Right.
we'd
Yeah.
push back against his. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, just want to set that qualification in there. But I do think, yeah. So with what you've just said, yeah, those societal benefits, can they be a powerful stepping stone? Well, I think we have to say yes. I think they increasingly, this is what is happening with a number of different public intellectuals. They are beginning with the benefits to society. Let's just, can we just use the phrase societal benefits of Christianity for right now?
Yeah, okay.
I think
Let's do it.
that's relatively innocuous. Yeah, because when I use a word like goodness, that's integrally integral to its its moral vision and its
Yeah,
practice, and that's
yeah,
that's powerful evidence.
we can
But
also talk
those
about like the
societal
existence of
outworkings and
common
benefits
grace, I
are
think. Common grace within
correct. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
I'm tracking with you.
But those societal benefits, I do. It certainly looks to me like that's a powerful stepping stone right now for a number of different people. Jordan Peterson would be in that category, I think. Increasing. Well, another person we need to mention here. I think David Brooks, who is now David Brooks is a Christian at this point, which I don't know if there
Catch us all up to
was
speed on
some
David
major
Brooks.
announcement made, but David Brooks, noted conservative columnist for the New York Times, very gifted writer, but and some of our friends had a hand in drawing him closer to Jesus. Actually, Nathan Os Guinness being one of them,
Okay.
and
Mhm.
then of course, and then also another friend of his was Tim Keller, who played an important
Okay.
role
Yep.
as a witness to him. But he's another one who recognized he would be a classic conservative in the sense of conserving what is best, and has pushed back vigorously against some of the more, I don't know, what do we call them, just sort of the mutations of current politics that kind of have infected
Yeah.
the whole political spectrum. And so he's gone off, he's an equal opportunity offender, in other words, with conservatives and with progressives. But he's another one who was drawn in initially to he was drawn to the moral vision of Christianity. I think Augustine of Hippo was a big part of that, but also he noted its civilizational benefits, the ways in which it nourishes a very healthy culture and civilization when it's practiced well. So I put
Mhm.
him in that category also.
Yeah, so this is
Yep.
interesting.
And so
There's
I it's a stepping stone. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm trying to think what the so, all right, this will sound like a rabbit trail, but it comes back in. So I was at this church conference, and they were trying to pass a resolution called "Standing with People of Color." Okay, so this is about racism and that kind of thing, right? And then it
Yep.
got all derailed because people were pointing out that "standing" is an ableist term, and if you use the word "standing with people of color," you're excluding all the people who can't stand. And so then this whole thing, turned into,
Mm.
and it was one of those like where at a certain degree, at a certain mindset and vision, everything is so critiqued and critical that you can't actually accomplish anything. And so what I think we're seeing
Yeah.
happen is a breakdown of people say like, okay, I'll just put my cards on the table here. Like on some categories, it's not about like winning, whether like the liberals win or the conservatives win. Like it's not about winning. It's about having the freedom to build and grow good things. And it seems to me that our political
Mm.
structures are increasingly being pulled into these weird like categories that just get bogged down within themselves on internal nitpicking, and they're not actually casting a good vision, nor are they providing the breathing room to experiment with ideas and go back and forth and wrestle and to build good healthy things out of them. So I think that's what I see happening with Jordan Peterson, as he's somebody who loves vigorous intellectual engagement and debate with moral and theological ideas. And you know what? Where is he finding that? With Christians. Like it
Right.
should make sense. And so for him, I
Yeah.
think he's just slowly, it'd be like, say you love playing soccer and Christians build the best soccer stadiums. You're going to kind of end up in one of their structures because they built the
Sure.
atmosphere in which you like to enact your gifts and the vision that you have. And so that I see as a little bit of the role of what the church is and can be doing right now, is kind of building,
Mhm.
which is, and so that's where the university came from. That's where hospitals came from. That's where all these things flourished out of this atmosphere that was
Mhm.
created within the church that then became Western civilization. So it's no wonder then that
Mhm.
if those people who enjoy those benefits are feeling a little stressed out when they step outside of it, that they're going to go back into um, the original atmosphere and find that as a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, and I also think I'm gonna take us back to the curveball you threw me, and this takes us in a different direction. We might end up back where you are, but I wanna go back to Kanye West for a second because I don't want to give the impression I think a few more remarks are gonna be needed here. I don't wanna give the impression, first of all, that I think his story is over because it isn't. And I don't want to give the impression that I think, he stands as, and I'm not saying that you did, Nathan, but that he stands as a sort of example, a warning sign of latching on to a quote celebrity Christian. I mean, it is true his dramatic conversion story involved also his creating an album called Jesus is King, which certainly did him no favors on the level
Mhm.
of popularity. His behavior has continued to be erratic, yes, because he clearly struggles. I mean, mental illness is a factor in his life. And so the danger here isn't so much, oh, latch on to somebody and then they let you down and turns out they weren't sincere in their convictions. Sometimes it's also you don't know, a person's story isn't complete yet.
Mm.
He's
Mhm.
so it's okay to look at him and say the Lord is likely doing some powerful things in his life. But most of us are slow learners, and
Okay.
moral transformation takes a long time.
I think I see a helpful
Yeah.
way to make a distinction here. So let's look at Kanye for a second. That's great. I am glad that the Lord is working in the lives of popular people. That's great. But what I would just caution us against at the end of the day is a celebrity adopting your faith does not make your faith more true. So the issue that I
Right.
have is not in Kanye's conversion, what God's doing in his life. It's the clinginess of the Christians who say, well, now that Kanye believes it, what I believe is more true. That's not how that works. So I think so I would put it
That
in the individual
or
already existing Christians, not in the new converts.
well, or the other thing that happens, I think, here is that these people become pawns in a culture war. So
Yeah.
now, in other words, Kanye now is on my team, or hey, we got David Brooks. In apologetic circles, this you can see this happen a lot. Wow, this super, super smart atheist is now a super smart Christian. So take that, atheists.
It's like we're picking our kickball teams
That's
on the
not
playground.
right. So that's really not the way we want to look at that as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's just worth pointing that out.
I think you're going to want to say something about goodness,
There,
though. Back to Ali.
well, yeah. So I think so on a larger note here, the goodness piece is my. This is funny. My dad had a phrase that he used a lot over the years. Goodness is primary. It's hard not to say. Goodness is primary. And
There
so we
you
used
go.
to
With the
laugh about
Scottish
that,
accent,
and
it's more true. Yeah.
with the, but it's more true with the Scottish accent. But this is this is absolutely true. And what's happening now is we've moved from. So I've heard this phrased various ways. I've heard people say, "Well, we've moved away from an evidential approach to Christianity to an existential approach." I've heard a lot of different ways of phrasing it. Most of them are helpful. One way of saying it is also we've moved away from a paradigm where people will ask you, "What do you believe?" to "Who are you?"
Mm-hmm.
And the stakes are much higher with that second one because now it's not about you providing external evidence or arguments for what you believe. The persuasive appeal of the gospel is going to come directly through your life, how you treat this person, your mode of conduct, all of that. It's all of a piece. That's what's going to draw people in. So essentially, this is Nathan. I think you and I could go on about this for a while, but I think Nathan and I would both say that this is true classic apologetics.
Yeah.
People will, this is the real. This is First Peter apologetics. It's the persuasive appeal of a life set apart for Christ and His kingdom while you're in a Babylonian kind of context. People will naturally be drawn to that. Some people will be irked by that, but they will ask you questions. But those questions will have to do with how you live your life. It's
Okay.
not going to be along the lines of you may get here. Yeah, I've said enough.
No, well,
Nathan,
I think
run with
we
this.
could. Yeah, let me try to make this conversation less interesting for a second. Let's bring in, let's bring in Charles Taylor. So because Taylor's idea. So this fits. Follow with me. We're on like the side rabbit trail of the rabbit trail at this point. But Taylor has a helpful term, excarnation. So in the
Right.
incarnation,
Yep.
God becomes flesh, carne, flesh, meat, and fleshed incarnation. And he says that a lot of Christianity in the recent years has been excarnating. So it moves Christianity out of the embodied life into a set of propositions or ideas. So the Christian faith becomes only an intellectual
Very
exercise.
helpful.
And when you do that, you're necessarily pulling it out of the way that you use your body in reality, which is where we form culture and
Mhm.
ideas and the common good is expressed or not. And so part of what we need is to chart that. And I think what we would say that some of the missteps of the apologetic endeavor has been to play in the excarnated space of arguing about the ideas without seeing the impact that those ideas have when they become embodied in our actual hands and households and the communities around us. So the lived good is the foundation of Christian apologetics in that sense. So I just thought I'd throw some academic vernacular in there to bring along the philosophers who are listening in.
And the stakes are not as high when you can just sort of take yourself out of the equation and discuss only ideas. Then you don't
Mhm.
have to worry about the personal. In fact, your own life need not intrude on the conversation. But when it's you, this is why for a long time Oz Guinness would say Christians really don't need to be screaming themselves hoarse about their rights, going on and on about how my rights are being violated. Now I want to operate with some sensitivity here because we're seeing increasing resistance to Christian values, and that's on the upswing. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. But on the other hand, Nathan, it's strikingly, I think it's rather striking, at least, that these are usually apologetic questions in nature. They're received often by people as political attacks.
Mhm.
I'm getting labeled as a bigot. I'm getting labeled as a sexist. I'm getting labeled as somebody who, who just doesn't care about other people and is oppressive, when in fact these are accusations that are actually holding questions of an apologetic nature. They have to do with, so why do you live your life the way you live it? Why do you practice sexuality in a way that is countercultural? Why do you follow Christ when there are so many other options on the spiritual menu? Why would you
Mhm.
have the audacity to say that other people are wrong? These these are they're apologetic in the sense that they hit us on the practical plane of where we live. And this is where we need to become more fluent. And also, but we a huge part of that, Nathan, here's the goodness piece again, is going to come down to how we, not just how we respond, have a really sharp response. In fact, your response almost is going to be secondary. The sharpness of your response. Look, smart people, intellectuals are a dime a dozen, especially nowadays. You got
Mhm.
great communicators. If you treat people kindly and genuinely kindly, even when they're mistreating you, I mean, gosh, it's almost as though Jesus said, love your enemies. Huh. Well, if you
So
do that, that will create massive cognitive dissonance, but also it will touch people in a way that you can't imagine because our culture is so angry right now. I mean, just go out on the roads. I mean, if you're all flicking each other off and screaming at each other and haranguing each other, if you are the opposite of that, it will absolutely make an impact. You just wouldn't believe it. So
yeah, I
that's
don't
part
think
of
we
the goodness piece is going to break through that. But yeah.
the discipled. No, you just got to put the right bumper sticker on your car, and then you're good. Um, okay, let me pivot
Mhm.
here just a little bit. So we're talking about conversions. We're talking about goodness, about culture, about embodied belief. So just a thought for people who are in Christian leadership listening to this. Look at the other proliferations of spiritual curiosity that are deeply physical. So I'll give you two that will sound nuts to you.
Hmm.
But if you step outside of your Christian bubble, the astrology and the crystals thing and all of that is still proliferating. I was talking to some European young ladies earlier this week, and they said, "Yeah, like we were all baptized as infants and got confirmed, but all of our, like everybody uses crystals and has an app that kind of gives them their astrological projections for the day." So you start thinking about like, so what's going on there? Where like, okay, here's somebody who has a crystal on a necklace tucked down their shirt, and this is providing them inner healing and realignment of their anxiety. So it's physical, it's tangible, it's very self-centered actually. It's like this is going to fix me and my problems. It's not eternal, it's very present. So you have that going on, and I can only assume that there's some sort of placebo effect that is at play there. But it's something you can hold in your hand and put under your pillow and sleep with. So there's that physical, tangible, graspable part. Then you get like the astrological side where it's like, okay, I'm going to download an app, put my birthday in it, and it's going to explain my life to me. That is a sense of
Mhm.
fatalism that's not naturalistically well, so it's not based on our DNA like a biological evolutionary fatalism, but it's like the stars are
Mhm.
aligned in this way, and so my life is thus.
Mhm.
Therefore, it's an antidote to chaos because everything is ordered and already assumed. Now, there's no freedom in that, there's no responsibility, and therefore there can't be any meaning in that. But these are all people are grappling with a way to try to get the physicalness of how they experience the world to align in such a way that it brings them emotional peace and stability. And so that I think there's a real opportunity there, but it's just another sense
Mhm.
of step. Like, look at what people are willing to do in order to find inner peace. And it reminds us that
Yep.
fundamentally, your interaction with those people is not going to be about whether or not the gospel is rational, because they already believe that, well, a number of
Right.
things that are not rational. So the question
Mhm.
is, people aren't rejecting Christianity because they don't think it makes sense. They're rejecting Christianity because they don't think it's good. So how do you get the
Very well said. Yeah.
Ali's of the world and the person using an app on their phone to get their astrological projection and buy the right crystal to give them inner peace, how do those people start seeing the gospel as good? That's a question.
Yeah, I mean, a powerful starting point might be when people convert, not saying, "Huh, I'm not sure that was real," and instead, welcoming them in. And I like, again, as Jake Mador concluded at the end of his article, which I thought was really great, joining the angels in celebrating. But yeah, I mean, on a less punchy note, yeah, being, by the power of the Holy Spirit, and so this, prayer and working together as brothers and sisters in Christ, being the antidote to the viciousness that's surrounding us. And also, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out as well that this is a, Nathan, you were getting at this earlier when you're talking about how in our politics and increasingly in our public spaces, there's no room to be wrong. There's no room to really grow and think. You need to just commit to a position immediately, and if you don't, you're severely penalized for it. But this is an oddly graceless moment.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
even it just, yeah.
So I was working with a guy who is a carpenter contractor, and I had messed something up. Like I cut it, we laughed about it, and I redid it. And he said to me, I was like, "Oh, I wasted that piece." And he said, "Nathan," he said, "I once worked with an old carpenter who said, it's not about not making mistakes. It's about knowing how to fix your mistakes. That's what makes a good carpenter." And I think the same thing is true when we
Mm.
look at communities. It's not about having a perfect community. It's about having a community of people who knows how to deal with each other when somebody in the community makes mistakes. So fundamentally, that is like, can I sin and still be part of this group? Can I sin and God still love me? What if I'm not perfect? What if I'm not right? And so it seems to me that the church and my participation in it, the beauty of it comes not in the sense that I see the church as a group of morally perfect people, but we all see ourselves in process. And it is a community that is graceful. So the law came through Moses, grace and truth
Mhm.
came through Jesus. So I like that, like transferring that idea in kind of in a practical sense of saying, are you part of a community that is um, repairable by the goodness and the grace of God that doesn't demand perfection and
Mm.
certainty in order for us to grow? And so I don't see other places in our culture right now outside of the church where that's a possibility.
Think on that. That's worth pondering, especially if you're somebody who maybe is on the fence a little bit here or actively wrestling with some of this. It's worth your consideration. We will likely return to, I say this a lot, but this is interesting territory. We'll probably, and there will, I think, I'm optimistic. I think we're going to see more conversions, and I think many of them will be names that might surprise us. So we
Yeah,
will
in the
likely
future.
return to this again soon.
Well, because
I
so
think so.
we're not going to do it right now, but in the future we need to talk about the conversion of witches, because we talked about,
We do.
popularity, we talked about the goodness of it, but what we haven't looked at yet is the conversions that are based off of a concept of actual powers of light and darkness and people deciding to change teams in
Yes.
that scheme. So we'll have to come back to that, but I just want to point out that we recognize that that's a category that's real right now on a lot of people's radars. Um, but we'll leave it at popularity and
Yeah, say
goodness
her
for
name,
now.
Nathan.
Oh yeah, well I think
We'll say her
yeah,
name real quickly, and
we'll have to look at Kat Von D's conversion, I think. Um
for sure.
for sure
Yeah,
at some point. So
Kat Von D.
you never know what we'll talk about next, but today
Well,
this
so
has been the outline.
the outline. But yeah, you've been listening to Thinking Out Loud, a podcast where we think out loud about current events and Christian hope.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.